page, Lamed Bais, 32. 32a, very easy. At least to find a place in this stuff is easy. After that, we'll see. It's a new Mishnah. Mishnah says, Echad Kodshi Mizbeach, Echad Kodshi Bedek HaBayis. Whether Kodshi Mizbeach, or whether it's Bedek HaBayis. Kodshi Mizbeach means it's a sacrifice. Bedek HaBayis means it's a temple fund. In Mishana Noisim Mikdush L'Kedusha, you're not allowed to switch the holiness. So in other words, a carbon, I can't switch from one carbon to another carbon. I can't switch Bedek HaBayis into a carbon, and I can't switch a carbon into Bedek HaBayis. I can't switch them around. Just say, it's all temple.
I came an hour early for Mincha yesterday, so I watched, since we're day behind, someone else's share.
For tomorrow, for today.
So I'm with you.
Oh, okay, perfect. So you'll correct us.
Won't correct you.
What did the comedian say? Does anyone know this joke? It's okay, so I can say it. So, umakdisha son, you can also sanctify them. Hekdesh Eily. We just started off saying that you can't switch from one to another. Then it gives us one exception. It says, and we're actually talking about specifically our Kodshi Mizbeach, even though it doesn't say that clearly in the Mishnah. Kodshi Mizbeach, a sacrifice. You can add an additional hekdesh onto it, and you say that this sacrifice I'm giving to the temple fund. A hekdesh Eily. It's an extra sort of hekdesh. It doesn't change it from being a sacrifice. It's still a sacrifice. But what he's going to now need to do is, how did he designate this sacrifice? If it was a neder, he said neder means a harei alai, that I'm going to need to bring a sacrifice. So that means that this animal he's responsible for, because if he doesn't bring this one, he's going to have to bring another one. So he does have a certain value, invested interest in this animal. So therefore, that value that he has, he's just designated to the temple fund. If he said in a dava, this animal, so then he really doesn't have a value, invested value in this animal, because if he loses it, he doesn't have to replace it. But nevertheless, he does have the right to give it to any Kohen to offer that he wants to. It's called Tevas Hanah. So what he's offering here, when he says there's a sacrifice that he's bringing to the temple, he says this sacrifice is a sacrifice that's going to the altar, I should say. And he says this sacrifice I'm pledging to the temple, to the Bedek HaBayis. So what's he giving there? Just the Tevas Hanah, that little interest, that little rights that he had, which has a certain value. He could give it to someone's brother-in-law that's a Kayan. Basically, if the guy pays him, so how much would he pay him for that? That's called Tevas Hanah. Machrim and Aisan. And it can also be Machrim. Machrim, we said, usually is that it goes to the Kayanim. So in other words, exactly what we just said, what would go to the temple fund, if that's Hekdesh Eily. If he wants, he can do a Cherem, and it can go, that little bit of interest that he has will go to the Kayanim. The Meisu, if it dies, Yikbru. You can't redeem it. Two reasons. One reason is, what are you going to redeem it for? Feed it to the dogs? It died. It's not usually you redeem a carbon to eat, right? You can't bring it out of mum, whatever, you redeem it and you eat the meat. But if it dies, it's only feeding it to the dogs. We learned before that there's a machlekes about that. So first of all, you can't feed it to the dogs. Second of all, we have another issue here called hamada v'aracha, that the evaluation of the animal needs to be done while the animal's standing. And if it's dead, it can't stand, so you can't do hamada v'aracha.
It's evaluation, basically.
Yeah, so it's a problem in the evaluation. Reb Shimon, who's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he says, Kodshei Bedek HaBayis, when it comes to things that are consecrated to the temple, the Meisu Yiftu, those you can redeem. We're going to have to see what the sages hold, but they definitely argue with Reb Shimon on that one case. What do they hold about sacrifices? We were explaining that they argue in both cases, sacrifices and Bedek HaBayis. Reb Shimon maybe agrees with them with sacrifices, but he argues with Bedek Habayis. We'll see in the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, again, Rav Huna is this first generation, or second generation Amayra rather, student of Rav, comes in and gives us a statement that throws us off a little bit for about a page. It says, Kachim Mizbeach Shetvisan Lechem Mikainim Lo Yasa Klam. If I have a sacrifice, and then I consecrate it for the priests, for the Kainim. So 1 second, it's already going as a sacrifice. You can't change it, but we learned in the Mishnah that you can add a little holiness. You can consecrate it again, and what that consecration would means that you now owe a certain value. You now owe a certain value of whatever rights you had to that animal, whatever interests you had in that animal. Now, comes along Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Rav Huna says that to Kayanim, if you do that, if you give it to Kayanim, you did nothing. It's already a sacrifice. There's nothing you can do now to give it to the Kayanim. To give this Tevas Hana or this other hektish to the Kayanim. It seems to go against the Mishnah, as we'll see. A Machriman Isan, the Mishnah says that you can. Let's see. Well, what's the reason? My timer. Amakra kol chayrim kodesh kadosh mehula Hashem. All chayrim is holy to God. Kol chayrim the kodesh kadoshim havi la Hashem. La Hashem hu, it's supposed to say. The Gra corrects it over there. Anything that's kodesh kadoshim that was originally kodesh kadoshim, that means it's a sacrifice. There's nothing that you can do to it. It belongs to Hashem. You can't take it in any way to give it to anyone differently, and there's no other pledges that can be attached onto this.
This is what you argued the other day.
I don't remember what you argued.
Yeah. When you talked about how could you have anything left? You've already made the pledge. You've already changed hands with yours.
I argued that. Keep it in your mind. I don't know.
Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. A brisa. I'm going to quote a brisa. The brisa has two parts to it, and each part has two possibilities. Kachim Bedek Habayis. That's something that's consecrated to the temple fund. She'etvisan bein lekachim mizbeach bein lecher mikainim. That was again consecrated, whether to the altar or whether for kayanim. So the halacha is la yasa klum. That's nothing. That's case number one, and those are the two possibilities of kachim mizbeach and cher mikayanim. Neither of them work. Why? Because it was already pledged to the temple fund. Cher mikayanim. Let's say it was pledged to the kayanim. It was consecrated for the kayanim. She'etzvisen bein lekachim mizbeach bein lekachim bedek habayis. That was now pledged as a sacrifice or for the temple fund, and it was originally pledged to the kayanim. So la yasa klum, you did nothing. Okay. Now the Gemara is medayik, not from what it says, but what from it didn't say. Right? It reads this like a shidduch resume. Why didn't it say ha kachim mizbeach? You didn't mention if kachim mizbeach shehitzves l'cher mekayinim. You didn't say that case. Why? Because mashasi over there it's going to work. You only said cases that don't work. But if it was a sacrifice that then you pledged for kayanim, so mashasi we should say that this new pledge that you've just added on top, at least the Tevas Hana, whatever interests there are there, that should be pledged to the kayanim. Tifta de Rav Huna, it's a kasha on Rav Huna. It's a kasha on Rav Huna because Rav Huna said clearly that kachim mizbeach shetvisan l'kayanim is la yasa klum. You did nothing, and the brisa left that case out. Why did it leave it out? Because that's not the halacha of la yasa klum. The brisa only told me la yasa klums, and this was not a la yasa klum. This was something that works. Amalach Rav Huna. Rav Huna could respond to you that it's not really a kasha. He could say like this. In other words, when we said tiyufta de Rav Huna, tiyufta de Rav Huna? He says no. Amalach Rav Huna, we can answer it. Ki shaira, what was it? Why was it leaving that out? Kachim mizbeach, adah shaira. The kachim mizbeach shetfisan lebedek habayis masha asa asa. The truth is that there is one case, kachim mizbeach, something that was consecrated as a sacrifice, that he then goes and consecrates it to the temple fund. So there is a certain amount of interest that he had in that sacrifice, whether maybe if it gets lost, he has to replace it, or the person that he can give it to. So he does have some value to that. Now that value is being pledged now to the temple fund. And what he does there is done. And that's why the Bais didn't say it. But for Kayanim, it's Le'asa Klum.
So he has his exclusion.
So the reason why the Bais left it out is because there is an instance by Kachim Mizbeach, by Bedek Habayis, that it does work, so it left it out. What did it leave out? It left out Kachim Mizbeach for Chermei Kayanim also. The Gemara right away asked, what are you telling me? You left out Kachim Mizbeach because Bedek Habayis, Matvis, the Bedek Habayis works, Mashasi Yasi, that's why you left it out. That wasn't our problem. Why did you leave out Kachim Mizbeach for Chermei Kayanim? That doesn't work. That fits in the Bais. But let's not Gabi Hanach. Why don't you teach it with the others? The part that does work. The Gemara explains like this: Tana des beitarti ktani, less beitarti lektani. If you look at the Bais, you notice there's two cases. First case is Kachi Bedek Habayis. That's the premise. What do you do to it now? It's two options: option A and option B. Either I consecrate it now as a sacrifice, or I consecrate it for the Kayanim. Case number 2 is Chermei Kayanim, something that was given to the Kayanim. I have two options, option A and option B. Option A is I now pledge it as a sacrifice, or I pledge it to the temple fund. In all of those instances, which is now 4 instances, the rule is Le'asa Klum, you did nothing. Now I have a third option, a third case. That case is Kachei Mizbeach. And again, I have two options. One of them is that you pledge it to the temple, and one of them is that you pledge it to the Kayanim. The problem is that the Brisa only wants to list things that both of those, option A and option B, have the same halacha. Because option A, a sacrifice which is now pledged to the temple fund, does work. It does work. So therefore, even though option B, pledging it to the Kayanim, does not work, it didn't list option B in that list of things that don't work. It only listed those things that have both options don't work. Okay, Tanan. Start in the Mishnah. Makdash Eisen Hekdash Eily. Says that you can consecrate it to Hekdash Eily. My love, Hekdash Eily lebedek habayis. It must be in Hekdash Eily, means that you're consecrating a sacrifice. It's already a sacrifice. You're consecrating again to the temple fund. What's machrimin? Machrimin l'chermei kayanim. The Mishnah didn't explain that, but it says hekdesh ilay umachrimin aisan. What is the chayrim? Chayrim means that you pledge it to the kayanim. Well, this seems to be very clear against Rav Huna. I have a sacrifice. I pledge it to the kayanim. I should owe the kayanim some money here for the replacement cost of the sacrifice or the tevis enough for the sacrifice. The Gemara says like. Idi kachi bedek habayis. It's both bedek habayis. V'leishna mapik lebelashin hekdesh lebedek habayis. Leishna mapik lebelashin chermei lebedek habayis. I have two ways of consecrating it to the temple. Either it's bedek habayis, I call it hekdesh ilay, or I call it chayrim. But it's both to the temple. In other words, chayrim could be used. It could mean different things. Chayrim could mean to the temple, and it could mean to the Kayanim. We were learning that it means to the Kayanim, and now we had a kasha on Rav Huna. Rav Huna responds, it means to the Bedek Habayis. You just said Bedek Habayis? We said, yeah, what we're trying to say is that however you said it, Bedek Habayis or with the term Chayrim, both of them will work. But it's only Bedek Habayis.
That's pretty analogous to a computer only works with hardware and software. So Bedek Habayis requires the Kohanim, otherwise how do you have everything going on? So therefore there isn't much of a difference because it wouldn't work without either.
Yeah.
The Kedusha would still be there of Kosh
Right.
Kedoshim, but you wouldn't have anything
Right.
else.
So here we have the sacrifice. We know where that goes. It's going to be offered in the temple, on the altar. The guy then says the sacrifice is consecrated to the temple. Oh, well, it's already a sacrifice. What's he doing over here? What he means to say is that the certain interest that he had in the sacrifice is now he owes that to the temple as well.
So otherwise, where would have naturally gone without that?
Well, just the sacrifice would have been slaughtered. Now he has to pay a certain amount of money of interest that he has invested in this. Why? Because if he loses it, he needs to replace it, or he can give it to any kohen that he wants. So in other words, there are other values to this sacrifice other than the actual sacrifice. So the sacrifice is going to be
But
sacrifice.
if a person doesn't say anything,
Yeah, he brings it to the temple.
he's a simple
It's a
guy.
sacrifice.
No, this is an extra donation.
But what I'm saying is, if you have an extra dollar in your pocket, you can either keep it or you can give it. I got it. But here it says, I'm giving you the money. So there's an extra hana involved that he can. But what I'm asking is, so what happens if it was early in the morning, the guy wasn't thinking, he says, take it, do it. He walks away. What would have happened with either that hana, that extra benefit, whatever?
No.
Who would have
He never would
received
have.
it?
Right.
If
He
he
never
didn't-
would have had to come on to that. He never would have had to come on to that.
So it's only if he was talking
Yeah.
aware that there's an
It's-
extra benefit, and he has
In
now
case,
zchus,
it's sort of like
if you will.
insurance
Wow.
that there could have
Otherwise, it
been.
would have just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
It just-
Yeah, it's like insurance.
So this extra interest that he has, is it contingent upon an event happening, or is it there all the time in all cases?
So what's happening here is normally he would only know about that interest if he would lose it,
Right.
or if he would choose to give it to a specific kohen, or someone would come to him and say, "Please give your sacrifice to my brother-in-law, son-in-law, who's a kohen, and I'll pay you a quarter for it, just for giving it to him instead of that other kohen." So he would have found out that that he can make money
It has
off
a
this,
value.
that it has a value, but naturally he would just do whatever he wanted, and he would never know about that value.
Well, it's fine. When I prepared this yesterday by listening to another share, I think they gave the share all wrong because
Let me call him up.
because it's long distance because they didn't discuss this kind of minor value. The way it was given was, I'm giving the value of this, and I'm like doubling the value of the animal, and that is the additional value. It was like doubling.
So there
down.
is an instance where the value would get doubled. That instance is if the animal gets lost, and he pledged a certain way. He says not this animal, because if he pledges this animal, then if the animal gets lost, then it's lost. But if he pledges, I'm accepting on myself to give an animal. So if this animal that he's now thinks he's taking gets lost, well, he never pledged this one, so he has to bring another one. So he does have an interest in this animal, because now when he goes over to this animal and he says, I'm pledging this animal to the temple, so he's already bringing it as a sacrifice. He has a responsibility that if it gets lost, he needs to bring another one. And he has to give this now to the temple. So what is he giving to the temple? Just the responsibility, that guarantee, sort of, that it,
Yeah,
if it
but
gets
that's
lost.
not what they were saying. They
Uh-huh.
were saying actually the vow, and that's why with the
It has to
thing
get
just one second, where Shemesu, in other words, when you said they have to be standing and be able
Right.
to be evaluated. He said this whole scenario doesn't happen until right before the shechita,
Shechita?
where the gizbar or whatever his
Right.
name has to be there.
Oh, one
to
second. So that we're going to get
evaluate
to
the-
in a second. Wait,
Oh, maybe that
wait,
was
he's
it.
right. On that point, he's right. I just didn't get up to that. One second.
I never remembered. So.
So you are okay. The good news is you did listen. You get
The Gemara
The
asks.
problem was I remembered the wrong calf.
just a minute.
What are you telling me that it's all about the Kabayas? We have a brisa different. It says the Tanya bebrisa. The brisa explains hektish Eily is kachi by the Kabayas. Umachrimin oisam chermei kayanim. We were reading into the brisa that cherem meant. We were reading into the Mishnah that cherem meant to the temple, in order to avoid the question on Ravuna. In other words, how did we want, we read it actually Kayanim, correct. But because of that, we had a question on Ravuna. Rav Huna would respond to that and he would say, no, it means Bedek Abayas. But actually, if you try to give a sacrifice to the Kayanim, once it's already been consecrated as a sacrifice, so that you did nothing. It's already a sacrifice, like Rav Huna says. The Mishnah says, Machrim and Aisan, that means to the temple fund. But to actual Kayanim, individual Kayanim, that doesn't work. So now we say, 1 second. The Bais says that Chayrim means Kayanim. So why are you trying to read the Mishnah in this way? We have it clearly elaborated on in the Bais differently than the way you're explaining it. V'oid, another problem. Hatanya, was taught in the Bais. It's a big problem. Consecrated to the Kayanim, it does work. It's a kasha on Rav Huna. Tiyufta de Rav Huna, tiyufta. It's a strong kasha on Rav Huna. The Gemara says, you have a kasha on Rav Huna, but Rav Huna had a pasuk. So he had support. But Rav Huna kra kamar, but Rav Huna had a pasuk. Amar Ula, Amar kra. Rav Ula says the pasuk doesn't mean exactly what Rav Huna said. We can learn the pasuk differently. We have braises that disprove Rav Huna. You worried about a pasuk? Let me tell you what the pasuk means. Amar kra chayrim. Pasuk says chayrim, and it says kol chayrim, all chayrim. What all chayrim is coming to add is that chayrim would apply even on something that's hekdesh already before, even that's a sacrifice. So in other words, the pasuk could tell me the opposite. Okay. The Gemara asks, Miyamar Ula Hachi, does Ula say that it actually works, that you can make a chayrim on something that was already consecrated, that's a sacrifice? But Ula says, if someone has an oila sacrifice, a burnt offering, and he takes it while he's taking it to the temple, and he takes it and he says, I'm giving it to the temple fund. Well, does he now owe the temple fund money? It says no. Ein ba ela ikuv gizbarim. All he has over here is that the gizbar needs to stand by the sacrifice at the time of the slaughtering, because normally the owner of the sacrifice needs to stand there. Right. Here we're gonna take the gizbar and say, because this was also pledged to the temple, and you're in charge of the temple, so you stand by the sacrifice. However, does he owe any money? He's giving a sacrifice to the temple. He does not owe any money. That's clear. Rav Ula says the only thing ein ba'ela, the only thing that he has is that the gizbar, the guy in charge of the temple fund, stands there. Now, Rav Huna held that if you have a sacrifice that you give to the Bedek Abayas, it works. You do owe the Bedek Abayas money. Right. You only don't owe Kayanim money. If you have a sacrifice that you give to Kayan and that you then pledge to Kayanim, you don't owe the Kayanim money. That was Rav Huna's halacha. Comes along Ula, and Ula says not only doesn't it work for Kayanim, like Rav Huna says, but it even doesn't work for Bedek Abayas, because he has a sacrifice he's pledging for Bedek Abayas. Now Ula is being more stringent than even Rav Huna, because he's saying that you don't owe any. It's not stringent, but it's extreme, more extreme than even Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said he would owe the money to the temple fund, and Ula says he doesn't owe the money to the temple fund. He for sure doesn't owe the money to the Kayanim if he would do that. So this is a question. The Gemara says that it's midrabanan. What's midrabanan? When the Bais has said before that kachim is beach shehitris lachem mikayim masha says what the Bais implied that cher mikayim would work, and we explained that it actually doesn't work. It's cher bedek abayas. It's bedek abayas that works, and that's why we left it out. Really, it works for cher mikayim as well, but that's all midrabanan. So when Ula says over here that you have to give to the Kayanim a sacrifice that was pledged, that was repledged to Kayanim, that's only midrabanan. So Hamatras Eily lebedek Bais. Here we're talking about the original din, that he really doesn't owe any money. That's the biblical law, that he doesn't owe any money. With the Rabbanan, he's supposed to give the money. Ukra l'me'ila asa. L'me'ila asa, that's supposed to probably. In the pasuk, l'me'ila huda asa. That's what the Shita Mekabetz is correct. The pasuk that he brought over here that says, Kol cherem, even if he's pledging what was previously a sacrifice, he has to give it to the kohanim. We said that's only rabbinic. How does it rabbinic if you have a pasuk? That's not. That means it's biblical. So he says, actually, that pasuk is referring to me'ila. That he's going to violate the laws of me'ila on anything that's consecrated. Kol cherem, anything that's consecrated, and he then uses for personal use, that's a violation of me'ila. So the Gemara says, in other words, the pasuk is referring to something else. Gemara says, "L'me'ila, lama likra." I don't need another pasuk to tell me about me'ila. Kaddish kadashim ksiv. It says kol cherem. The pasuk says kol cherem kaddish kadashim hu Hashem. It says it's kaddish kadashim for God. Now you're telling me that kol cherem is including that? No. It's if I have the words kaddish kadashim there, that means that it's holy for God. It means that I know already the laws of me'ila, and you don't have to include it with any other extra words. Gemara says, 1 second. According to your logic, Rabbi Yanai says that me'ila is only applicable originally to oila.
So every other place has to be stated.
Shenemar, nefesh kisim al mal v'chata b'shgaga mikadshei Hashem hamiuchadim l'Hashem. Only things that are strictly for God, and that's a burnt offering. Other sacrifices are eaten by kayanim and the owners. Chatas v'asham lo yinafke ela midrabi. But chatas and asham, I need another source for that, to get a chatas and asham that there's me'ila. The Tanya Rabbi Aimer, kol chelav l'Hashem, all the fats to God, or all the best to God. L'Rabbi Simuri kachi kalem l'me'ila. So that's coming to include the limbs of a kachi kalem, even a kachi kalem animal, which is normally eaten by the owners. But before it's slaughtered and all of that, there is me'ila on that. So the Gemara asks, Lam likra kadshei kadashim ksivbu. Why do you need these psukim of kol chelav l'Hashem? Ella afagav the kadshei kadashim ksivbu ba'ikra l'rabbeinu me'ila. Obviously, kadshei kadashim does not tell me me'ila. So charamim nami afagav the kadshei kadashim ksivbu ba'ikra l'rabbeinu me'ila. Okay. So we just proved in a rather long, roundabout way that we need a pasuk to tell me that there's me'ila there. So if someone pledges something to kayanim, there would be me'ila as well.
Excuse me, I have to back up, because I asked yesterday about what me'ila was, and you said it was where you get extra
personal use from something that was consecrated.
That was consecrated.
Now we were saying that...
Well, that's why I asked the question yesterday. Now it's coming back to me. But, so, I have a question here now. This whole page we just learned, where you've already consecrated an animal, and then you want to go and give this extra donation,
right,
which I assume you get some hana out of doing. Why is that that additional donation not considered me'ila? It's already been consecrated, and now you take a consecrated item and you do something additional to do benefits. But one of them is you.
So, let me just repeat the question. You're asking that giving a sacrifice or giving a donation benefits the giver.
I would think there's a hana,
spiritually or something. So, I think the answer to that is that the rules of Me'ila mean that you have some personal usage out of it, which makes it look, you're taking it away from its holy status, and you're using it in your own private kitchen or something, you know.
It's that specific.
It's any sort of benefit for personal use. It's sort of like degrading what's holy. Here you have no degrading aspect of I'm pledging something more. I'm giving more. It's showing the opposite.
You know, I've seen people who,
Don't speak
You
Lashon
know-
Hara. Don't speak Lashon Hara.
no, it's not.
Okay,
It's
tell us anyway.
no, the concept of when a donation is given. All
No,
right?
here we
No, you a person buys an aliyah when it's being auctioned. Yantif, when you do this great job, and someone goes and spends $1,000, typically you buys the aliyah. No, I'm just
If he's here, it's not Lashon
No, it's not him. All right, no lashon hara, but this typically the setup, and then they come up there. They've already paid for the aliyah, and then the Rabbi says, "V'nodar," he asks him for more money. And it happens a lot. And it's like always, I'm saying, wait a minute, the guy bought the aliyah. What do you ask him for more? And he always says, do you want to give anything extra? It almost sounds like he's set up to do a milah. And those people who can do that, they come out as...
So none of this is Mila.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
because you're Tmalim B'Kodesh.
None of this is Mila.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
You're
Sure.
every time I give another donation, you're saying, well, you're getting benefit from the fact that you're giving a donation. That should be Mila. No, Mila is if I take the donation that I give, and instead of giving it to the temple, I say, just 1 second, I'm just going to invest it a little bit here because I think I'm going to get some money out of this, and then I'll give a bigger donation. That would be Mila,
Okay.
right?
I wanted to understand.
Okay, Gufa.
milah.
It's important.
No.
We learned
Still
before.
got Lashon Hara.
You can give as much as you want. They'll keep on taking it. Don't worry. God should give you back 10